I would ask the Attorney General and the Prime Minister to be and remain consistent. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. I take note of the Attorney General's statement issued on the 25th of June, in which he offers the opinion that the Agong can only act upon the advice of the Cabinet in calling for a session of Parliament to take place, citing Articles 39, 40 and 43 as well as other precedents. I accept these articles are consistent with the normative practices of a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy. Let me add that there is a more fundamental principle underlying the application of articles and precedents to our current situation in Malaysia, that of legitimacy. Legitimacy of a sitting head of government in a democratic system derives from his or her ability to command the confidence of the majority of the members of Parliament. If the government has no legitimacy, then it is frankly a waste of ink and breath to talk about any other article of the Constitution other than those which pertain to re-establishing legitimacy. If, as we see taking place today, the laws are being used to sustain an illegitimate government, then we, the elected members of Parliament, sworn to uphold the Constitution, must draw a clear line. The question of legitimacy is not a theoretical one. The PN government's legitimacy has never been affirmed from its moment of inception according to the proper mechanisms provided in a parliamentary democracy, namely the tabling of motions of confidence. This puts the Prime Minister and his cabinet in a precarious position. In order to govern with legitimacy, including the seeking of royal decrees, they must affirm their majority support in Parliament. If not, then there is no more accountability and the nation may be subject to tyranny. This may explain the PN government's extreme reluctance for Parliament to meet. Furthermore, the Constitution requires that a proclamation of emergency and emergency ordinances, such as those issued this year, be debated and voted on by Parliament. The failure of PN to facilitate these acts of parliamentary accountability, I would argue, already placed Malaysia in the danger zone of a constitutional crisis. The Agong was wise to link the sitting of Parliament to these necessary parliamentary actions, tacitly asserting that Parliament sitting as soon as possible means before the scheduled end of the emergency. Once again, the PN government's extreme reluctance to debate the emergency in Parliament is another sign of its lack of legitimacy. I recognize the nation is facing a historic crisis, and now is not the time for political grandstanding. It is a time for unity, clarity of purpose, and decisive action. However, constitutions are not written for good times, only to be tossed aside during crises and calamities. It is precisely during periods of stress and strife that a nation of laws must adhere to constitutional norms and conventions, even if some believe them to be inconvenient. History is witness to the many instances of tyrants and despots who take advantage of periods of national calamity to further their nefarious agendas at the expense of the nation and laws designed to ensure fairness, justice, and accountability. In the invocation of various articles of the Constitution, I would ask the Attorney General and the Prime Minister to be and remain consistent, accept the Constitution in its entirety and not just piecemeal. The Attorney General's statement, read in the light of the statements by the Agong and the Malay rulers issued on 16th of July, is seen by some to be an obnoxious and insulting provocation against the royal palace, which may precipitate a constitutional crisis. In calling for Parliament to meet as soon as possible, the Agong, I believe, was merely expressing the sentiments of the majority of members of Parliament and the aspirations of the vast majority of Malaysians who are rightly disillusioned by the government's failure to handle the pandemic even with emergency powers. Why is the convening of Parliament at a time when factories, restaurants, and now a number of state assemblies are operating such a difficult thing? We see extraordinary efforts being made, including using the office of the Attorney General and the Speaker of the Parliament to delay and discourage Parliament at a time when the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic seems to be as listless and hopeless as ever. Malaysia seems to be one of the most inept nations at handling the pandemic, be it procurement of vaccines, testing, and appropriate use of lockdowns. In the process, the country's economy is being driven off a cliff, after which millions of people will be cast into destitution and poverty, and some economists are predicting prolonged recession. While it may be too late to avoid a worst-case scenario in the near term, in order to begin to repair the damage that is being done, Parliament must convene immediately. Thank you.